The alley was never meant to be there. It emerged like a fold in the fabric of the night, between two buildings on a street Nora had walked countless times. But this time the air felt heavier, and the moonlight caught on something it shouldn't have. Nora hesitated, heart thudding, as she peered into the narrow slit between brick walls. There, glowing faintly in the mist, stood a bookshop where no shop had stood before. Its windows were fogged, its sign aged as if forgotten by time. Nora whispered, "This wasn't here yesterday." As she stepped inside, the scent of sandalwood and rain-damp paper enveloped her. The shelves stretched impossibly tall, filled with tomes that hummed with quiet power. A single lamp glowed above a counter where an old man sat, eyes closed, as though waiting for her. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing her into a place that belonged to no time, no city. Just silence, and the quiet stirrings of something ancient waking up. Nora's footsteps echoed like whispers through a cathedral of memory. She reached out to touch a nearby book. Its cover was made of cracked leather, inked with symbols that shifted when viewed too long. A chill ran down her spine. The book pulsed as though alive. "Who are you?" she whispered to the empty air, but it wasn't empty. A whisper, not hers, brushed her ear. The old man's voice came from behind her, though his lips hadn't moved. He said, "You've come to remember, not to ask." She turned sharply, heart pounding, but he remained still, eyes closed, as if reciting a dream. Nora's breath quickened. The shop did not just contain books, it contained echoes. Each title seemed to murmur something old, something hers. Stories she had never read but somehow knew. She wasn't sure if she had walked into a store or into her own forgotten life. The clock above the entrance ticked backward. Nora watched it, hypnotized. Time had unhinged itself here. She turned to a book that had fallen open on the floor. It contained a drawing of a girl who looked just like her, standing in a field of burning trees. Her fingers trembled as she touched the page. The trees moved. "This is impossible," she muttered, but part of her knew this place operated on rules far older than logic. A wind rose from nowhere, rustling the pages of nearby books. The air smelled of rain and smoke, and something older, jasmine, maybe, from a memory buried in her childhood. She knelt and closed the book gently, as if sealing something inside. But her name was still whispering in the air. Nora. It called from books, from floorboards, from the dark itself. Somewhere in the shop's depths, a chime rang, clear, soft, final. Nora followed the sound. Each step seemed to take her further from the world she knew. The shelves turned darker here, the books bound in silk and stone. A mirror leaned against the wall, dust-covered, cracked. In it, she didn't see herself. She saw the alley again, but it was empty. The bookshop wasn't there. It had never been. A wave of panic struck her. Was she dreaming? Trapped? The old man's voice echoed again. "You are not lost. You are remembered." She turned from the mirror and whispered, "Why me?" The silence that followed was heavy. Then one of the books opened on its own, pages fluttering like wings, revealing a title, "The Girl Who Chose to Forget." It glowed, beckoning. Nora reached for the glowing book, her hand trembling. As her fingers grazed the cover, images surged through her mind. Her childhood, her mother's voice, a garden in monsoon rain, a fire, and then darkness. Her knees buckled. The shop caught her, cushioning her fall like a cradle. The old man stood now, his eyes open, deep wells of time. He said, "You came back to begin." She stared up at him, breathless. "Begin what?" she asked. He did not reply. Instead he turned and walked into the shadows between two shelves, and vanished. The book rose, hovering before her. As she reached again, the lamp above flickered, and everything slowed, like the air itself was pausing to watch. A choice was before her, and though her heart screamed to flee, her soul whispered. The book opened itself, pages turning as if guided by unseen hands. Nora sat cross-legged on the floor, unable to resist the pull. Each page held fragments of her life, some real, some forgotten, some too painful to remember. She saw her mother's eyes, filled with fear the night she disappeared. Her father's silence at the funeral. The page turned again. Her own reflection stared back, not as she was, but as she could have been, had she not run from the past. Nora whispered, "Why show me this?" The shop answered not in words but sensations. Sorrow, warmth, longing. Somewhere deeper in the shop, a door creaked open. She looked up. It hadn't been there before. A golden light pulsed through the cracks. The book snapped shut. Nora stood, heart pounding, and walked toward the door, unsure whether she was chasing memory or being hunted by it. The door opened to a memory. Not a room. Nora stepped through and found herself standing in a sunlit courtyard, the smell of wet earth and marigolds filling her nose. It was her grandmother's house in Lahore, untouched by time. A child ran past her laughing. It was her, age 7, carefree and barefoot. The child didn't see her. Nora tried to call out, but no sound came. Her grandmother appeared then, bent over a clay pot, humming the same tune Nora had dreamed of for years. The warmth hit her like a tidal wave. "I remember this," she mouthed. The memory shimmered, then flickered. Cracks appeared in the scene. Rain began to fall from a sky that moments ago was clear. Nora turned back, but the door was gone. She was inside the past, and it was breaking apart. Thunder rolled across the memory. The rain intensified. Little Nora vanished into the house as the older version stood alone under the storm. The colors began to drain, as if memory itself was dissolving. "Don't take this from me," Nora cried. The clay pot shattered beside her, flowers withering in seconds. Her grandmother looked up, this time directly at Nora. "You left before the truth could bloom," she said, voice echoing like a bell. Nora stepped forward, reaching out, but her hand passed through the figure. The memory peeled away like paint in the rain. When it faded, she was once again in the bookshop, but drenched, cold, and shivering. In her hand was a single marigold, real and fragrant. Proof she had truly been there, or had never left it behind. Back in the shop, the light had changed. Everything was deeper, richer, yet quieter. Nora walked with the marigold still in hand, dripping rain onto the wooden floor. The old man had returned. He was shelving books with titles that blurred when stared at. "Why show me pain?" she asked. He answered without turning, "Because you built your walls with it." She clenched the marigold tighter. "I survived." The old man nodded. "You endured, but now you must remember." He turned to face her, and his eyes held storms. "The past you avoid becomes the path you repeat." Nora looked at the marigold again, its petals now glowing faintly in her palm. "Then I will remember," she whispered. A gust of wind passed through the shop, turning every book's page in unison. As the book settled, one remained open. Its pages revealed a different version of Nora, older, peaceful, seated under a tree with a child in her lap. The child laughed, eyes bright with wonder. Nora stared, tears in her eyes. "Is this real?" she asked. The old man smiled. "It can be." The image shimmered but did not vanish. "What must I do?" she asked. He walked to her, placing a hand on the open page. "Forgive," he said. "Yourself, first." The word hit her like a wave. Nora fell to her knees. Years of guilt, anger, grief, all flowed through her like a storm draining from the sky. When she looked up, the image in the book had changed. Now it showed her, here, in the bookshop, smiling. The first honest smile in years. The marigold in Nora's hand began to wilt. The petals browned at the edges, curling like burning paper. "What does this mean?" she whispered. The old man had vanished again. The shop was no longer calm, it had shifted, become darker, almost watchful. Shelves tilted slightly inward, like trees leaning during a storm. Whispers filled the air, urgent and layered. Nora's breath shortened. She stumbled back into a passage she hadn't noticed before. A hall of mirrors stretched out endlessly, each one reflecting a different Nora. Angry, fearful, proud, broken. She tried to look away, but the mirrors pulled her gaze. One version screamed silently. Another bled from the eyes. "These are my selves?" she asked aloud. The mirror directly in front of her cracked down the center, and her reflection smiled, but she had not. Nora reached for the cracked mirror, drawn to the version of herself that smiled without warmth. The glass was cold, vibrating with hidden tension. As she touched it, her hand passed through. She was pulled inside. The world twisted. Now she stood in a version of the bookshop that was broken, corrupted. The books bled ink, the walls moaned, and the shelves were scorched black. From the shadows emerged a younger Nora, angrier, dressed in all black, fists clenched. "You buried me," the younger self growled. "You chose silence over truth." Nora backed away. "I was afraid," she admitted. "I didn't know how to carry it." The younger version stepped forward. "You still don't?" With a sudden lunge, she pushed Nora to the ground. Books flew off the shelves like birds startled into chaos. The impact was sharp, but not physical. It was memory. Nora collapsed into visions. Her mother crying in the next room. Her own voice yelling, "I don't care." Her father standing mute, unable to hold the family together. Grief, resentment, shame. They all surged at once. She screamed. But the scream shattered nothing. It only echoed. Her younger self stood watching, unrelenting. "You've spent years pretending it didn't matter," she said. "But pain doesn't vanish. It waits." Nora clutched her head, eyes wet. "Then what do you want from me?" she pleaded. The girl stepped closer and whispered, "I want you to feel it." With that, the younger Nora dissolved into smoke, leaving only the silence of knowing. Nora sat among torn pages and bleeding books, her breath ragged. A book floated down gently, resting in Nora's lap. Its cover was plain, no glow, no title, just worn leather. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were only blank pages, until ink began to spread on its own, sketching a scene in real time, her, here in pain, facing herself. Below it, one line formed slowly, "To heal, you must choose to stay present." Nora wiped her eyes. "But how?" she whispered. The shop answered with silence, but it was softer now, as if no longer angry. The corrupted walls began to lighten. The shelves stopped groaning. One by one, the pages returned to the books around her. Nora stood, steadier. "I'll stay," she said to the air. The ink on the page bled again, shifting the illustration into a version of her standing tall, whole, with the marigold rebloomed. She left the hall of mirrors. The bookshop had returned to its surreal stillness. The mirrors were gone. In their place stood a tree, gnarled, leafless, yet alive. At its roots was a bench, carved with the same patterns her grandmother once etched into fabric. Nora sat beneath the tree, breathing deeply. No voices spoke. No books moved. The storm within had passed, for now. As she looked up, the tree shimmered. Buds began to form. The first leaves in years. A new chapter waited, not written in the past, but in the present she was finally ready to face. The marigold in her palm remained whole. For the first time she closed her eyes, not to escape, but to rest. "I will return," she promised herself. The tree rustled in reply, a silent vow kept between them. The tree continued to shimmer long after Nora stood up. As she walked deeper into the shop once again, she noticed something new. A door behind the shelves where none had been before. It was carved in obsidian wood, its surface etched with symbols she instinctively understood, but had never seen. A heartbeat thudded from the other side, hers. She pressed her hand to the door, and it opened silently. Inside was not a room, but a void. Floating pages hovered midair, turning slowly. In the center stood a child, herself at 5, clutching a torn drawing. "You forgot me," the child said, eyes full of sorrow. Nora dropped to her knees. "I tried to protect you," she whispered. The child shook her head. You buried me. Then the pages burst into flame, but the child remained, untouched. The child stepped closer and handed Nora the drawing. A house on fire. Crayon flames licked at stick figure windows. Nora gasped. I drew this the day. She couldn't finish. Her voice broke. The child said nothing, only waited. Nora finally asked, Why did I forget this? The child touched her chest. Because it hurt more than anything. Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks. She remembered now, the house fire that took her mother. The smell, the screams, the silence after. It had been locked away so tightly, even she had believed the version rewritten to survive. The bookshop had not created memories. It had only revealed what had always been there. The child stepped back into the flames. Nora screamed, but the child smiled. You're ready. And then, she was gone. Ash drifted like snow in the silence that followed. Nora sat alone, the drawing in her lap, the fire extinguished. A voice spoke. Not the old man's, not the child's, but her own. You have always known. She looked up. A mirror rose from the ashes. In it stood a woman she barely recognized. Still herself, but clearer, stronger. The reflection smiled, not hollow, but whole. I am the version of you that walks without fear, it said. Nora stood slowly. And if I'm not ready? The reflection replied, then keep walking until you are. It vanished, leaving the glass clear. Nora looked at her true self for the first time in years. Aged, bruised, alive. She whispered, I see you now. The mirror cracked slightly at the corner but held, unbroken. When Nora stepped out of the chamber, the bookshop had changed again. The floor beneath her was now water, still and dark, reflecting the stars of a sky that wasn't visible above. She walked carefully, each step sending ripples across constellations. In the distance, a boat awaited. Small, wooden, familiar. Her father's old fishing boat. Nora hesitated, then walked toward it. As she climbed in, she saw someone already seated, the old man smiling gently. Where does it go? She asked. He replied, Where you need to go, not where you want. The boat began to move, slowly, silently, through a sea of memory and stars. Nora didn't ask more. For the first time, she trusted the unknown. The boat drifted toward a horizon made of light. Nora sat beside the old man, silence stretching comfortably between them. He finally said, You've crossed the first gate. She turned to him. How many are there? He answered, As many as you need. Ahead, the water became shallow, turning into the polished wood of the bookshop floor once more. The stars faded, replaced by the soft glow of morning. The shop had opened again, not just to her, but to the world outside. The front door stood ajar, golden light spilling in. The old man vanished with the boat, without a word. Nora stood, the marigold still blooming in her palm. She was ready to step forward, not to escape, but to begin. Again. Nora stood in the glow of the open door, heart pounding. The street outside looked unchanged, quiet, moonlit, but she knew the change was within her now. Yet as she took a step forward, the door slammed shut. Darkness swept in, and the shop was gone. Only silence. Then, a voice she had not heard in years spoke behind her. You were supposed to wait for me. Nora turned, and gasped. Her mother stood there, not as memory, but real. Young, radiant, dressed in the night she died. This isn't possible, Nora breathed. Her mother stepped forward, eyes soft, haunted. I never blamed you. Nora's knees went weak. But I did, she whispered. Every day since. The air pulsed, charged. Then forgive, her mother said, or relive. Shadows began to form around them, memories, regrets, all demanding judgment. The shadows twisted into shapes Nora recognized, her younger self walking away from her mother, the funeral without tears, the years of silence. They circled her now, whispering accusations she had long buried. Her mother remained still, unaffected. Pain doesn't vanish when ignored, she said gently. Nora screamed. I was a child. The shadows surged. You were, her mother affirmed. But the woman you became carries the child's silence like armor. Nora clutched her chest, sobbing. I didn't know how to love you and live without you. Her mother stepped closer, placing a hand on her heart. Then love me now, by letting go. The shadows paused. Nora looked at them, at herself. I release you, she said, voice shaking. One by one, the shadows unraveled into light. As the final shadow vanished, the bookshop began to glow, from its floorboards to the rafters. Every shelf illuminated, every book humming with life. Nora and her mother stood in the center, hand in hand, surrounded by quiet brilliance. Her mother smiled. This was always inside you. Nora trembled. But why this place? Her mother turned to the shelves. Because books remember what we forget. A breeze passed through, flipping pages in perfect rhythm. Her mother kissed her forehead. You don't need me to return. You only needed to remember. I was with you even after I left. Slowly, she began to fade, becoming part of the light, her form scattering into golden dust. Nora did not cry. She closed her eyes and whispered, Thank you. The shop breathed with her. Nora wandered the bookshop now, not as a lost soul, but as one newly awakened. The titles on the shelves no longer blurred. She could read them now. Truth, sorrow, belonging, acceptance. She reached for one labeled forgiveness, and it opened in her hands, revealing blank pages. Then, her handwriting began to appear, letters to herself she had never written. You were enough, one line read. You survive. Another, now, live. The shop seemed to exhale around her. Somewhere above, a bell rang. Light, joyful, final. The marigold in her palm glowed so brightly it felt warm. A path of light extended forward between the shelves, leading to a new doorway. This one was not carved from mystery, but from light. No key required, only choice. At the threshold of the doorway, Nora paused. Behind her, the shop was still, timeless. Ahead, a new world waited, undefined, yet full of breath. She turned once more to look at the place that had reshaped her. Thank you, she said aloud. The shop seemed to shimmer in reply. As she stepped through, she was met not with blinding light but a soft morning sky, dawn breaking over the city. She stood in the alley again. The bookshop was gone. Just walls and silence. But in her hand, the marigold bloomed brilliantly. A child walked past her, smiling for no reason. A bird sang. And Nora, for the first time in years, felt herself smile without grief holding it hostage. She walked into the day. Not a different person, but her whole self. The city greeted her not with noise but with stillness. Nora walked its early streets, familiar buildings now layered with something unseen. The shop may have vanished, but its memory lingered in the texture of air, in the way sunlight touched windows. She sat at a cafe where her mother once took her as a child. The table was the same. The smell of cardamom in the tea brought tears to her eyes. But this time she let them fall without resistance. A young couple laughed nearby, reminding her of herself once, naive, searching. Nora didn't look away. She watched and smiled. Her pain wasn't gone, but it no longer ruled her. It sat quietly now, like an old friend who had said all they needed to say. The marigold rested in her coat pocket, still whole, still warm. She visited her childhood home next. The door was locked, windows dusty, the garden long overgrown. Yet standing at the gate, she did not feel sorrow, only reverence. Nora closed her eyes and with a breath, pictured the laughter that once echoed in its rooms. Her mother dancing while cooking. The child she had been running barefoot through puddles. Thank you, she whispered to the empty house. It didn't reply, but the wind did, lifting her hair gently like a nod. She left a marigold on the doorstep, a gift to memory. As she turned to walk away, she didn't look back. Some things once healed are no longer meant to be reopened. The past had been honored. Her steps now belonged to the present. In the days that followed, life returned, but differently. Nora noticed everything. The way clouds moved across the sky like stories. The way strangers' faces held entire books of sorrow and joy. She volunteered at the library, restoring damaged books, running her fingers over words like sutures. One evening, she placed a handwritten note inside an old philosophy text. "You are not what you have lost. You are what you choose to remember." A teenager found it days later and smiled without knowing why. Nora didn't wait to be thanked. The work wasn't for recognition. It was for weaving what she had gathered back into the world, quietly, gently. The bookshop had disappeared, but its truth now lived in her hands. One night, weeks later, Nora returned to the alley. Not in hope, but in gratitude. The walls stood just as they had, plain, forgettable. But the moon was bright again, and the air shimmered faintly. She placed her hand on the brick and closed her eyes. A whisper stirred, gentle as breath. When the soul is ready, the door will return. She opened her eyes to find nothing had changed, and everything had. She smiled. The shop had not vanished. It had taken root inside her. She walked away, not empty, but whole. The night felt warmer somehow, the stars closer. In her hand was a folded piece of paper. Not her writing. It read, "You remembered." She didn't need to ask how it got there. She simply folded it again and walked on. That evening, Nora sat by her window, watching the city breathe. Lights flickered in distant towers. Somewhere, someone was grieving. Somewhere else, someone was falling in love. She was neither. She was simply present. The marigold now lived in a glass of water by her bedside, blooming as if nourished by more than just water, by story, by healing. She picked up a blank journal. No title. No intention. Just space. And began to write, not to remember, but to witness. Page by page, without hurry. A smile touched her lips. Outside, the stars stirred. And far away, though not visible, the bookshop watched quietly, content that one more soul had walked its path and returned with light. Morning arrived with no fanfare. Nora opened her curtains and watched as sunlight crept gently across the walls. No revelations. No magic. Just a soft hush that made the air feel sacred. She brewed tea slowly, savoring each motion. For the first time in years, her body felt like home. The shop had not returned, but its presence hadn't left her. She moved through her small apartment with grace, touching each object as if waking it from sleep. A photo of her mother on the windowsill, still, serene. "We're okay now," Nora whispered. The marigold stood tall in its glass, petals wide open to the morning light. She didn't need the bookshop to appear again. She had become it. A keeper of memory, a shelf of forgiveness, a page turned without regret. Outside, the world moved as it always had. Cars passed, strangers talked, birds flew overhead. But Nora moved through it with new vision. She no longer sought signs or omens. She looked people in the eye. At the bookstore she now worked at, she spoke gently with customers, especially those who lingered too long near the shelves labeled philosophy or grief. She never asked questions, only listened. One afternoon, she handed a small boy a book about stars. "This one glows if you're kind to it," she whispered. The child giggled and ran off. Her co-worker asked, "Did you make that up?" Nora smiled. Maybe. She never mentioned the night bookshop. But sometimes when the store closed, she'd find a single book out of place. Always one she never remembered shelving. On her way home one evening, Nora walked a longer route. Not because she was lost, but because the path felt like a hymn. Trees swayed above her, casting moving shadows on the pavement. In the stillness she heard her mother's laugh, not from beyond but within. Memory and self had braided into one. At a small bridge overlooking the canal, she paused. The water moved slowly, reflecting stars and street lamps. Nora whispered, "I am here." No audience. No ceremony. Just truth. The wind wrapped around her like a shawl, soft and familiar. She let it pass, letting everything pass. Thoughts, doubts, even the desire to understand. All that remained was breath. And that she now knew was more than enough. That night Nora dreamed, but not of fire or sorrow. She stood once more at the threshold of the bookshop, but it didn't beckon her inside. This time, it bowed to her. The shelves shimmered, the old man nodded, and the child's self danced among the aisles. All three aspects of her, past, present, potential, woven into one luminous thread. She did not speak. She only breathed. The marigold bloomed in her hand, and then turned to light, dissolving without pain. She smiled. When she awoke, it was still dark, but her heart was lit. She touched the empty glass where the flower had been and whispered, "Thank you." The night held its silence, no longer threatening, just still. The bookshop hadn't disappeared. It had ascended into her. In the quiet of pre-dawn, Nora lit a single candle, and sat on the floor. She no longer sought to fill the silence. She honored it. With the marigold gone, her altar held only space. And in that space, freedom. She closed her eyes and breathed. Nothing needed fixing. Nothing needed chasing. All was unfolding. A whisper rose, gentle as wind through reeds. Everything you needed was always here. A tear slipped down her cheek, not of sadness but of fullness. Of clarity. Of release. When she opened her eyes, the sky was just beginning to pale. The day had not yet begun, and yet she felt it fully. She stood. No more doors to open. No more pages to turn. Just the quiet joy of knowing she had arrived.